Just in time for the presidential election, Steve Bannon, or the founder of MAGA, as some would say, will be freed from federal prison next week. He was jailed after he refused to testify in front of the January 6th committee. He was charged with contempt of Congress. Bannon had hoped to spend the final 10 days of his sentence in Washington, D.C. under home confinement, but that request was denied.
Bannon predictably slammed the Harris-Biden administration, falsely claiming he was detained illegally. The far-right site, the National Pulse, published a statement from Bannon which said, quote, "Kamala Harris is the queen of mass incarcerations, detested by Black and Hispanic men who are refusing to turn out and vote for her. She has done nothing to implement President Trump's heroic First Step Act, in fact, welcoming hundreds of thousands of hardened illegal migrant criminals while allowing U.S. citizens eligible for early release to rot in prison." To discuss further, we have Benjamin Teitelbaum, author of War for Eternity, a great book, inside Bannon's far-right circle of global power brokers. Welcome to Rising, Ben. So, okay, we're expecting Steve Bannon to be released on Tuesday. Let's cut to the chase. Do you think he's going to jump right into the campaign and start advising, and what do you expect in this final, frankly, week of the election?
I don't think that he'll start advising. His tools, you could say, of influence have always been networking and communicating. And what I would expect is for him to jump back onto his podcast, War Room, and that there'll be a significant amount of buzz around his opening words. But we've seen throughout these past years that Trump and the people closest to Trump have been friendly to Bannon. They might have met with him in private, but they haven't wanted to have a public association with him that much.
And what is the reason for that? I mean, I know that there was some bad blood after the first Trump administration. What was it that kind of led them to decide to distance themselves, at least publicly?
Well, that's what you just mentioned is part of the reason. The two men at the top, Bannon and Trump, do not get along well together. And having spent a lot of time with Bannon, I think I can understand why. The two of them are huge personalities, huge egos. The thought of being in the same room with both is quite a harrowing prospect. But I think that there's also a political and a strategic calculation that says that they're not really going to expand their base through Bannon. Bannon exists in order to deepen convictions. He's there to speak to the more uncompromising, the more radical wings of the Trump coalition, to keep them motivated. And at this point, they are motivated. So Bannon's real interventions, I think, could come later, after the election, whether that leads to a Harris victory or a Trump victory, in terms of trying to prepare the Republican Party and conservative American politics to be more in the form of, let's say, J.D. Vance or Josh Hawley, as opposed to Mitch McConnell.
Ben, in your book, you talk about this network, this global network that Bannon has been very involved in. You know, not just, if people recall, he started this monastery to train the far right in Europe. That monastery was in Italy for the EU elections. Of course, he was behind the Brexit campaign, very involved in that. But beyond that, what I find really fascinating about the book is you get into the psychology and some of the spiritual aspects of what informs Steve Bannon in this global coalition. So right now we're seeing reports almost daily about how Russia and other foreign adversaries are influencing our elections in different ways through misinformation. Today, Elon Musk, there was a report in the Wall Street Journal about how Elon Musk has been in discussions with Vladimir Putin for the last couple of years. Can you give us a sense about what his role is right now, especially since he's been in prison, in this sort of global coalition to back MAGA, I'll say, not even Donald Trump, just MAGA in general?
Yeah, he's been reaching out. There have been a couple motivations behind his global campaign. One of them has been China. He's believed that if we redrew our map of alliances, we might come up to a place where the United States could lead a more formidable coalition against China's global interests. The other part of this has been, though, that he has also wanted to see the United States withdraw from its role as a sort of global police, as he would put it, a global police force, and also to not see the dollar be the currency of the world, because he doesn't think that serves the United States. And so he's been working on these campaigns for a long time. The problem is this, though, Namiki, is that I think he underestimated it, is that some of his allies in Europe in particular have not had the same analysis that he has had of Russia. He is basically, and I've had a number of conversations with him about this, and I've quoted it in my book. He basically thinks that Russia is a Western nationalist Christian state, very much in the model of Europe, and therefore that Europe ought to be in some sort of alliance with Russia. Much of Europe, including much of the far right in Europe, does not agree with that analysis. And when the Ukraine war came about, we saw a split take place there. So that was a sort of deep-seated problem with his plan. The other part of this, though, is also that Russia and China are close. They've gotten closer. This alignment between China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran has only deepened. And so that global campaign, kind of the way that he had set the table for himself, has been scrambled. It was scrambling before he went into prison. It's happened more since in these past 4 months. And so it just as an observer of Bannon, someone just looking for things that are curious, I'll be interested to see exactly how he analyzes and wants to move forward in this new changed geopolitical landscape.
Just going back to domestic politics for a moment, what is Steve Bannon's thought process on Trump's choice of J.D. Vance to be his running mate? There were obviously more sort of traditional establishment Republicans that were being floated, like Tim Scott, for example. And then Trump angered a lot of the establishment Republican Party by choosing J.D. Vance. Does Steve Bannon sort of see him as a potential torch carrier for MAGA beyond Trump?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing is I was asking myself, how is he going to react to the scene when he exits domestically? I think J.D. Vance is going to be the thing that excites him the most. He was worried, and he said this to me, he said it to other reporters, that one of his biggest concerns was Donald Trump himself and Trump's tendencies toward moderation, his tendencies toward equivocating, to negotiating, to simply being influenced by the last person who was in his ear. And so he was worried about MAGA becoming less MAGA over time. And J.D. Vance emerges as someone who would push back against that. He's a hawk on immigration. He's a hawk on Ukraine. People have different opinions in this country about how much money should be given to Ukraine, for example. We disagree about that. Relatively few people took as staunch a position on Ukraine as J.D. Vance did so early, and he has been so consistent with this. So Bannon will be thrilled with that. I think he'll also be thrilled with the way that Vance performed in this campaign. He had a rocky start, no doubt. His negatives are very, very high, no doubt, but he performed quite well in the VP debate. And that surely is going to boost enthusiasm for Vance within the Republican Party, and that's what Bannon cares about more. That's more his strategy. It's not about building broad coalitions. It's about deepening the convictions among the faithful. And so yes, that's where a future for Vance would come in.
So this is interesting to me because I would have actually thought that J.D. Vance was a little bit too mainstream with the Heritage Foundation Project 2025 alignment. I would have thought for someone like Steve Bannon, who's populist, a little bit rogue, he wouldn't fit in with the more traditional, even traditional conservative types. So moving forward, Trump's elected, not elected. J.D. Vance is definitely the torchbearer of the party. How do you think Steve Bannon is going to integrate with the new realignment of the Republican Party, which includes Heritage Foundation, Project 2025?
Yeah. I understand the point that you're making, no doubt. I mean, Heritage has changed quite a bit as well. I know we think of it as being this beacon of Republican establishment, but it also is moving in a much more populist direction. And not just that, but it's also investing in the potential role that government can play, a sort of government interventionist role, opposite, let's say, a more libertarian model of anti-government. It's just that they want the government to do the specific things that they want it to do, not that they're opposed to government per se. And so those ideas that are coming out of Heritage, Project 2025, those things aren't as much at variance with Bannon as we might think. But your broader point is true. Bannon is moving into a different type of coalition. Some of the opinions moving here are ones he likes, and some he doesn't. I think the bigger clash is not with Heritage per se, it's with Silicon Valley. It's with Elon Musk its potential with Peter Thiel, David Sachs, those actors. Bannon is a nationalist. You could say that he's a nostalgic. He's a religious conservative in his own way. All of those things are not quite as obvious in Silicon Valley. There's an emphasis on the ability to move capital and people around to compete on a global level for talent, for goods, for the ability to escape regulation and things like that. And there's not a drop of nostalgia to be found in a politics of nostalgia and a politics of the past golden era. That doesn't meld very well. Now, J.D. Vance bridges the gap between these two worlds, being at once supported by Bannon, a hawk on immigration, nationalist, but also coming from Peter Thiel's sphere, and that might make him give him a longer life within this movement. But it's still a problem for someone like Bannon.
Oh, really interesting. Ben Teitelbaum, thank you so much for joining us this morning on Rising.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.